My name is Audrey Linwood. I'm 29 years old, and I'm a logistics officer in the United States Navy. My job isn't glamorous. I don't kick down doors or fly jets. I move numbers, large ones. Every day, I manage supply chains worth millions of dollars, fuel allocations, cargo distribution, weight tolerances down to the decimal. If a shipment is off by even 0.5%, it doesn't just delay a mission, it compromises it. So I don't guess. I verify. I don't assume. I audit. And I don't trust numbers that don't make sense. That's the part my family never understood. I was stationed at a naval base on the East Coast when all of this started. My day began at 0500, same as always. Physical training, quick shower, black coffee. By 0630, I was already reviewing a manifest discrepancy, flagged overnight container weights, didn't match declared totals. Someone had either made a mistake or hoped no one would notice. I noticed. By 0900, I had already corrected 2 reports and flagged a third for investigation. Clean, efficient, predictable. That's how I like things. My life runs on structure. Controlled inputs, measurable outputs. My sister Chloe operates on something else entirely. Chloe is 25. She's never held a full-time job. Not once. She's had projects, short bursts of enthusiasm that usually ended the moment they required consistency. A lifestyle blog that lasted 3 weeks. A boutique candle brand that never shipped a single order. But none of that mattered, because Chloe is the golden child, and now she's engaged. Her fiancé is the son of a real estate developer back in our hometown. Old money, country club memberships. The kind of family that doesn't check price tags. My parents, Marcus and Elaine, treated that engagement like a merger between corporations. Strategic. Celebratory. High stakes. Every phone call I'd had with them over the past 3 months had turned into a briefing about the wedding, venue tours, floral designs, guest lists that sounded more like networking rosters than family invitations. They didn't ask about my work. They didn't ask where I was stationed. They asked if I could get leave for the event. The event. Not your sister's wedding, not family, just logistics. From people who never understood what that word actually meant. I kept my responses short, neutral, controlled, because I've learned something important about my family. Information is leverage, and they use it. The call came in at 11:42. I remember the timestamp because I was reviewing a fuel allocation report when my phone buzzed across the desk. My mother's name lit up the screen. Elaine Linwood doesn't call during the day unless she wants something. I let it ring once longer than usual before picking up. Mom! Her voice came through fast. Tight, controlled panic. Audrey, thank God you answered. We need your help, not hello. Not how are you, we need. I leaned back slightly in my chair, already shifting into assessment mode. What happened? It's the venue, she said. Chloe's venue, the botanical garden. They moved up the deposit deadline, and we need to secure the date today. I didn't respond right away. I let her keep talking. It's a premium slot. There are other couples waiting. If we don't lock it in, she loses everything. Everything, I repeated. Yes. Audrey, this is her wedding. I glanced at the report still open on my screen. Numbers that actually mattered. Numbers tied to real operations. How much? There was a brief pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. 40,000. I didn't react outwardly. That's the deposit, yes. It's standard for high-end venues. You wouldn't understand. That last part was unnecessary, which meant it was intentional. I ignored it. And you're calling me because we need you to transfer the money. Today. There it was, direct. No softening. I swiveled slightly in my chair, facing the window. I'm not doing that. Silence. Then sharper this time. What do you mean you're not doing that? I mean, I'm not transferring $40,000 for a wedding deposit. Audrey, this isn't just a wedding. This is Chloe's future. No, I said. It's an event. Her tone shifted. Less panic, more pressure. You have the savings. You've always been responsible. This is what family does. I'd heard that line before. Usually right before something unreasonable. I'm saving for a house, I said. That money is allocated. You can save again. That's not how financial planning works. There was a short, frustrated exhale on the other end. You're being selfish. I didn't respond to that either, because labeling behavior doesn't change facts. Then she said something she shouldn't have. You have to, Audrey. The credit line is already active. That was the moment everything changed. I straightened in my chair. What credit line? Another pause. This one wasn't calculated. It was a mistake, the one we set up for the deposit. It's under your name, so the rates are better. It's temporary. We just need you to transfer the funds to cover it. I didn't say anything, not because I didn't understand, but because I did, too quickly. I minimized the report on my screen and opened a secure browser. Logged into my federal credit monitoring account. Two-factor authentication, verification code. My mother was still talking, something about family, about Chloe, about expectations. I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching the numbers load. Then I saw it. A newly opened commercial credit line, $40,000, maxed out, status active, payment due in 30 days, linked directly to my social security number. I clicked into the details. Origination timestamp. 3 days ago, IP address and location, my parents' home. I didn't feel shock. I didn't feel anger. I felt something much more precise. Confirmation. Mom, I said, cutting through whatever she was saying. Who signed the paperwork? She hesitated again. Don't be dramatic. It's handled. We just need you to... Who signed it? Another pause. Then softer. We did what we had to do. That wasn't an answer, but it was enough. I looked at the digital document attached to the account. Scanned PDF. My name at the bottom. A signature. Perfect. Too perfect. I know my signature. That wasn't it. But it was close enough to pass. Close enough for a bank that didn't expect fraud from a family address. I leaned back in my chair again, this time slower. Listen to me carefully, I said. We are not discussing a transfer. You're overreacting. You opened a credit line in my name. For your sister. You forged my signature. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Facts don't require volume. There was breathing on the other end. Fast now. You're making this into something it's not. I glanced back at the red balance on my screen. $40,000. Not theoretical, not potential, already spent. I'm going to handle this, I said. What does that mean? It means I'm not sending you anything. Audrey, if you don't fix this, you're going to ruin your sister's wedding. I closed the browser tab. No, I said. You already did that. She started talking again. Faster, louder. I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear. I didn't drop the call. I didn't hang up. I just listened long enough to confirm what I already knew. This wasn't a request. It was a cover-up. And they expected me to participate. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream at my mother. I just stared at the glowing red numbers on my screen, realizing that the people who raised me hadn't just asked for a favor, they had already stolen my future. I muted my phone and let it vibrate itself into silence while I reopened the account. The first rule in logistics is simple. When something goes wrong, you don't react, you reconstruct. I pulled up the full transaction history tied to the credit line. Origination date, authorization method, device fingerprint. Every system leaves a trail. Most people just don't know how to read it. I do. The account had been opened through an online commercial lending portal. No in-person verification. That meant the entire approval process depended on digital inputs, identity data, credit profile, and a notarized document upload. The system trusted the data. That was the first mistake. I accessed the back-end details available through my monitoring service. Not everything is visible to civilians, but I have clearance to request deeper logs when financial fraud intersects with federal identification. It took me less than 10 minutes to file a formal inquiry. While I waited, I opened a clean document and started building a timeline. 3 days ago, 14:22 hours. Credit line opened. 14:24 hours. Funds fully drawn. No staged withdrawals. No hesitation. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. My phone buzzed again. My mother, then my father, then Chloe. I ignored all of them. If this was what I thought it was, and it was, then every word they said from this point forward would be designed to reshape the narrative. I don't operate on narratives. I operate on evidence. At 12:03, the system pinged back with additional data. IP address logged at account creation. I copied it into a tracer. Location resolved in under 2 seconds. Suburban residential network. My parents' house. I didn't feel surprised. I felt efficient. Confirmation means you can move forward. I added it to the timeline. Then I opened the document attached to the credit line. The loan agreement, standard commercial format, terms, rates, repayment schedule. 30-day initial cycle before interest penalties escalated. Aggressive but not unusual for unsecured credit. At the bottom of the document was my name, printed correctly, and below it my signature. I zoomed in. Line weight was slightly off. Pressure pattern inconsistent. Whoever forged it had practiced. Enough to pass a visual scan, not enough to match muscle memory. I signed documents every week, hundreds of them over the years. That wasn't my signature. It was a copy of it. A good one, but still a copy. I scrolled further down, notary section. That's where they made their second mistake. The stamp was clear. Name, license number, expiration date. I recognized it immediately. Daniel Reeves, my father's business partner. 20 years of shared deals, shared investments, shared shortcuts. Of course they used him. I leaned back in my chair and let that settle into place. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was structured. They had access to my personal data, social security number, employment details, credit history. They had access to someone who could validate documents. And they had a reason. Chloe's wedding. I checked the timestamp on the notarization. Same day. Same hour. Everything executed in one clean sequence. No gaps. No hesitation. That's not how amateurs work. That's how people operate when they've already justified what they're doing. My phone lit up again, this time with a voicemail notification. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. Instead, I opened a new tab and started cross-referencing the lending institution. Regional commercial bank. Mid-tier compliance protocols. Likely automated fraud detection with delayed human review, which meant I had a window. A small one, but enough. The phone buzzed again, and again, and again. I picked it up on the fourth call. My father this time, Audrey. His voice was calm, controlled, like he was negotiating a deal. You need to stop overthinking this. I'm not overthinking anything. This is a temporary bridge. Chloe's fiancé's family will cover everything after the wedding. We just needed liquidity. Liquidity, he actually used that word. You committed fraud, I said. No, we leveraged family resources. That's not how the law defines it. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. You're blowing this out of proportion. No one is going to press charges over a family matter. That's not your decision, Audrey, he said slower now. Real families don't let their sisters be humiliated on their wedding day. There it was, not logic, not denial, guilt, weaponized. I didn't respond. Because guilt only works if you accept responsibility for something that isn't yours. This is bigger than you, he continued. This is about Chloe's future. No, I said. It's about your choices. He exhaled sharply. You've always been like this. Cold, calculating. You don't understand how relationships work. He was right about one thing. I don't treat relationships like transactions. They do. I'll call you back, I said, and ended the call. I set the phone down and returned to the document. There was one more thing I needed to confirm. The submission email. Most digital lending platforms send confirmation copies to the applicant's listed email address. I checked my inbox. Nothing. Then I checked my spam folder. Still nothing. Which meant they had used a different email or intercepted the communication. I opened the account details again. Alternate contact email listed. It wasn't mine. It was a variation of my name with an extra number, created recently, sloppy. I flagged it in my notes. Then my inbox refreshed. New email, from Chloe, subject line FWD urgent. Loan approval. She forwarded it by mistake, or she thought I wouldn't understand it. I opened it. The original thread was intact. Bank confirmation, approval notice, attached documents. And below it, Chloe's reply to my parents. I told you this would work. Her credit is perfect. They didn't even question it. I scrolled further. Another message. If she finds out, just tell her it's temporary. She won't do anything. She never does. And then the line that removed any remaining ambiguity. She's basically a boring spinster anyway. It's not like she needs the money. I read that sentence twice, not because it hurt, because it clarified intent. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. They didn't just use my identity. They calculated my reaction. They assumed compliance, based on history, based on pattern, based on the role they assigned me in this family, reliable, predictable, disposable. I closed the email and added it to the file. Evidence doesn't care about tone, only content. Then I sat there for a moment, not thinking about them, but about process. Next steps, sequence, timing. In the military, distance isn't a disadvantage, it's a buffer. It gives you space to prepare without interference. They thought I was across the country and therefore disconnected, unavailable, out of reach. They were wrong, because the same systems that allow me to track cargo across oceans also allow me to trace a single transaction back to its source. They thought this was a family conversation. It wasn't. It was an operation. And I had everything I needed to proceed. They thought being stationed across the country made me blind and powerless. They forgot that in the military, distance doesn't stop an operation. It just gives you the perfect cover to plan an ambush. I submitted the emergency leave request at 14:26 and booked the first available flight before the approval email even finished loading. Timing matters. If you wait for everything to be perfectly aligned, you lose control of the situation. I wasn't going to give them that advantage. By 1940, I was in a window seat reviewing the evidence file on my tablet. IP logs, loan documents, the forged signature, Chloe's email, clean, organized, chronological. I wasn't flying home for a conversation. I was verifying variables. The plane landed just after midnight. I didn't call anyone, didn't text. I checked into a hotel 10 minutes from my parents' house and got 4 hours of sleep. At 7:30, I was back in uniform, not for appearance, for clarity. Uniforms remove ambiguity. People behave differently when they see structure standing in front of them. At 8:12, I pulled into the driveway I grew up in. Same house, same lawn, same carefully maintained image. I walked up to the front door, didn't knock, and used my old key. They never changed the locks. That was their third mistake. Voices came from the dining room, multiple, light, animated, the kind of tone people use when they're planning something expensive. I stepped inside and followed the sound. The dining table was covered in fabric samples, cream ivory, soft pink, swatches arranged in neat rows, floral catalogs open to pages marked with sticky notes, glass vases lined up like inventory. Chloe stood at the center, holding a tablet showing something to my mother. Marcus sat at the head of the table, reviewing what looked like a printed budget sheet. No one noticed me at first. Then Chloe looked up. Her expression didn't change to surprise. It changed to annoyance. "You didn't say you were coming. I didn't need to," I said. That got everyone's attention. My mother straightened immediately, smoothing her blouse like she was about to host a guest. "Audrey, we were just going to call you." "I know." Marcus stood up slowly, like he was preparing to manage a situation instead of reacting to one. "This isn't necessary," he said. "We can handle this over the phone." "No," I said. "We can't." I stepped further into the room, setting my bag down by the wall. I didn't sit. I didn't accept the environment they created. I observed it, every detail, the printed venue contract on the table, the deposit line circled, 40,000, already processed. "You shouldn't have come like this," my mother said. "We're in the middle of something important." "I'm aware." Chloe crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic. It's just money." I looked at her. "No," I said. "It's fraud." The word landed exactly where it needed to. Marcus moved immediately to intercept. "Enough," he said. "We're not using that language in this house." "It's not language," I replied. "It's classification." He walked closer, lowering his voice. "You need to understand something. The situation is already in motion. The loan is active. The deposit is paid. The only thing left is to formalize your involvement." "My involvement," I repeated. "Yes," my mother said quickly. "All you have to do is sign the official paperwork. Make it legitimate. The bank won't question anything if it's properly documented." I glanced at the documents on the table. New forms, clean copies, prepared in advance. They had planned for this. "You want me to co-sign," I said. "It's just a formality," Chloe added. "Stop acting like it's a big deal." I didn't look at her. I looked at Marcus. "You forged my signature," I said. "And now you want me to validate it." "We corrected a timing issue," he replied. "This is how business works sometimes." "No," I said. "This is how investigations start." There was a shift in the room. Not panic, pressure. My mother stepped forward. "Audrey, listen to me. This is your sister's wedding. Do you understand what it would mean if this falls apart? The embarrassment, the humiliation." I did understand. I just didn't assign value to it. "That's not my responsibility," I said. "It is when you're part of this family." There it was again, family, used like a contract I never signed. Marcus picked up one of the documents and placed it in front of me. "You have two options," he said. I didn't touch the paper. "Option 1, he continued, "you sign this. Today, we move forward. No issues, no complications. And option 2. He didn't hesitate. You don't sign. And you're done. My mother inhaled sharply, but she didn't interrupt. Marcus held eye contact. You will be completely disowned. You will not attend this wedding. You will not be part of this family moving forward. Clear, direct, measurable. An ultimatum. I nodded once. Timeline, I asked. 48 hours, he said. After that, we proceed without you. Proceed. As if removing me from the equation solved anything. Chloe leaned back slightly against the table, watching me, waiting. She expected a reaction, emotion, resistance, negotiation, something she could use. You're not actually going to let this ruin everything, right? She said. It's one signature. I finally looked at her. She wasn't nervous. She was confident. Because in her version of the story, I always comply. I always adjust. I always absorb the impact, so she doesn't have to. That pattern had worked for her before. It just wasn't going to work again. I reached down, picked up the document, and glanced at it. Loan validation form. My name already printed. Blank signature line. Waiting. I placed it back on the table. Then I straightened my posture. Not for them, for me. Because posture isn't about appearance. It's about decision. My mother stepped closer. Audrey, just sign it. We can fix everything later. Fix. Another word that assumes cooperation. I looked at the three of them. Marcus focused on control. Elaine focused on image. Chloe focused on outcome. None of them were focused on reality. That made the next part simple. I let a small smile form. Not warm, not emotional. Just enough to signal closure. Good luck, I said. 2 words. No explanation. No argument. No escalation. Just a statement. Chloe blinked like she hadn't processed it correctly. That's it, she asked. I didn't answer. Marcus's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. No, I said. You already did. I picked up my bag and turned toward the door. My mother called after me. Audrey, if you walk out now, don't come back. I didn't stop. Because threats only work if they remove something you value. And at that moment, they had already shown me exactly what they thought I was worth. I stepped outside into the morning light and closed the door behind me. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just sequence. Because the decision had already been made the moment I saw the account. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about containment. And they had just given me everything I needed. My sister rolled her eyes, thinking my silence meant I was retreating to lick my wounds. She didn't know that I wasn't walking away to surrender. I was walking away to initiate an absolute financial lockdown. I didn't go back to the hotel. I drove straight to a legal office 15 minutes outside the base perimeter, one that didn't advertise heavily and didn't need to. The kind of place people get referred to, not stumble into. The name on the door matched the one I'd already pulled from a military legal resource network during the flight. Civilian attorney, prior defense contractor, specialized in financial fraud and federal compliance. Translation efficient, discreet, and not emotionally invested. Exactly what I needed. The receptionist didn't ask many questions once I gave my name and showed my ID. I was in an office within 6 minutes. He walked in with a file already in his hand. Late 40s. No small talk. Lieutenant Linwood, he said. I read your intake summary. I kept it brief. That helps. He sat down across from me and opened the file. You're alleging identity theft, commercial fraud, and unauthorized credit activity tied to your social security number. I'm not alleging, I said. I'm confirming. He nodded once. Good, let's keep it that way. I handed him my tablet. IP logs, loan documents, forged signature, notary stamp, email confirmation from involved parties. He took it without hesitation and started reviewing. No reactions, no commentary, just processing. After about 3 minutes, he set it down. This is clean, he said. Defined clean, documented, traceable, verifiable. You didn't bring me a story. You brought me a case. That was the point. What's the fastest way to shut it down, I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly. You're not trying to negotiate with them, correct? No. You're not trying to recover the money quietly, no. You understand this will escalate beyond your family. I already accounted for that. He gave a small nod. Good. Then we don't send texts. We don't make calls. We don't warn them. Agreed. We file. That was exactly what I expected. He turned his monitor slightly so I could see. We're starting with an identity theft affidavit through the Federal Trade Commission. That formally documents the fraud and triggers federal tracking. He began typing. Then we submit a fraud report directly to the bank with supporting evidence. Once they verify unauthorized activity, they initiate an immediate freeze. Define immediate, within hours, sometimes faster, and the loan frozen, flagged, investigated, balance locked, liability not yours. That was the only line that mattered. He continued typing precise and fast. This also opens the door for wire fraud classification. Crossing state lines, digital transaction, forged documents, this isn't small. I didn't respond, because I already knew that. He glanced up briefly. You're aware this could result in criminal charges? Yes. And you're proceeding anyway? Yes. He went back to the screen. Then we do it properly. No hesitation, no moral debate, just execution. We submitted the FTC affidavit first. Digital signature. Timestamp. Confirmation number generated instantly. Then the bank report. He attached every piece of evidence I had organized. IP trace, forged signature comparison, notary identification, email thread, clean, linear, undeniable. When we finished, he closed the file and looked at me. Now we wait. How long? Not long. I checked the time. 10:08. By 10:47, the first confirmation came in. Fraud report received. By 11:12, the second. Account flagged for investigation. By 11:36, the third. Temporary hold placed on the credit line. I didn't react, because this wasn't the outcome. This was just the beginning of it. At 12:03, the attorney's phone rang. He answered, listened, then handed it to me. Fraud department, he said. I took the call. This is Lieutenant Linwood. The voice on the other end was professional, controlled. Ma'am, we've reviewed the initial documentation. Based on the evidence provided, we are escalating this to a full fraud investigation. Status of the account frozen. Define frozen. No further transactions can be processed. All activity is suspended pending review. Outstanding balance under investigation. You are not currently held liable. Associated accounts. A brief pause. Any accounts linked to the originating transaction are being reviewed for potential exposure. That was the part they didn't anticipate. Understood, I said, and ended the call. I handed the phone back. It's done, I said. The attorney nodded. For now. I sat there for a moment, not thinking about them. Thinking about sequence. Because financial systems don't operate in isolation. They connect. And when one part is flagged, everything tied to it gets pulled into the same review. That's not punishment, that's protocol. At 13:22, my phone started vibrating. I didn't look at it. At 13:25, it rang again, and again, and again. I let it build, because volume doesn't change outcome. By 14:10, I checked. 23 missed calls. Elaine, Marcus, Chloe, unknown numbers. I muted the device and set it face down. At 16:40, the attorney received another update. This time, he didn't hand me the phone. He just looked at me. They expanded the freeze. Scope primary accounts connected to the transaction. Checking savings, anything linked to the same identity cluster. I nodded once. That was expected. When fraud hits a financial system, it doesn't isolate politely. It spreads through the network until everything questionable is contained. That includes assets, access, liquidity, which meant one thing. The wedding wasn't just under pressure, it was offline. 48 hours after I walked out of that house, I was sitting in the same chair, in the same office, drinking black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. My phone lit up again. I turned it over this time. 64 missed calls, voicemails stacked, messages unread, all from the same 3 names. I didn't open any of them. I didn't need to, because I already knew what they were saying. Not apologies. Not accountability. Requests. Demands. Panic. The system had shifted, and for the first time they weren't controlling it. At 13:14, a new voicemail came in. I let it sit for exactly 30 seconds before pressing play. My mother's voice, breaking. Audrey, please, they canceled the venue. They said the payment didn't go through. Chloe she's devastated. You need to call the bank. You need to fix this. I stopped the message there. Not because I didn't want to hear the rest, because I already understood it. The venue didn't cancel because of me. It canceled because the money wasn't real. Because the system finally recognized what I saw in the first 30 seconds. Unauthorized, unverified, unacceptable. I set the phone back down on the table. No response, no reaction, just observation. Because this wasn't the end of the process. It was the first visible consequence. And there were more coming. At 1:14 p.m., my mother left a voicemail, sobbing that Chloe's venue had canceled their reservation. It was a beautiful performance, but the true masterpiece of their destruction hadn't even started yet. I let the silence sit for exactly 12 hours before I checked anything. Not because I was overwhelmed, because timing matters. If you respond too early, you step into their narrative. If you wait, you see the shape of it. At 8:02 the next morning, I unlocked my phone and opened social media for the first time since I left their house. My mother's profile was at the top of the feed. Elaine Linwood doesn't post often. When she does, it's curated, controlled. Family photos, holiday messages. The occasional grateful for my blessings caption. This was different. A long post, paragraphs, carefully worded. No parent ever expects betrayal from their own child. We sacrificed everything to give our daughters a good life only to be repaid with cruelty, when it mattered most. I didn't read the entire thing. I didn't need to. I've seen this pattern before. No names, no direct accusations. Just enough detail for people who know us to connect the dots. Victim positioning, emotional framing, strategic omission. The comments were predictable. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Family should always come first. Praying for Chloe. No one asked for evidence. They don't. They respond to tone. And my mother knows exactly how to control tone. I scrolled once more. Second post. This one shorter. Some people will destroy what they can't control. That line wasn't for strangers. That was for me. I locked the phone and set it down. No reaction. Because public perception doesn't change facts. And facts were already filed. At 9:17 my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Lieutenant Linwood, yes, this is Richard Hastings. I didn't interrupt. I believe our families are connected through my son's engagement to Chloe. Connected. That was one way to describe it. I've been informed there's been some disruption, he continued. Accounts frozen, venue cancellations. I wanted to hear your side before making any conclusions. Professional, measured. He didn't sound emotional. He sounded like a man used to managing risk. What exactly were you told? I asked. A brief pause. That you've been under a significant amount of stress. That you reacted aggressively. That you may have accessed accounts you weren't authorized to access. There it was. Not just a lie, a constructed narrative. She said I hacked them, I said. I'm not using that word, he replied carefully. But the implication was that your actions caused the financial disruption. I leaned back slightly. Your son is not aware of the full situation, I said. Another pause. No, he admitted. He's currently trying to manage Chloe. That told me everything I needed. He didn't know, the fiancé didn't know, which meant Chloe had isolated the information. Controlled the flow, same strategy, different audience. I recommend you verify the source of the credit line, I said. I intend to. Good. I didn't elaborate. Not yet. Because information delivered too early can be dismissed. Timing. He exhaled slowly. If what you're implying is accurate, this becomes a very different situation. It already is. We ended the call without resolution, which was fine. Because resolution wasn't the goal, clarity was. At 11:03, a certified letter arrived at the front desk of the legal office. My name, my temporary address. I signed for it and brought it inside. The envelope was thin, cheap paper. Low-tier legal formatting. I opened it and read it once, then again. Then I handed it to my attorney. He scanned the first page and smiled, not amused, evaluating. Well, he said, that's bold. Define bold. They're threatening to sue you. For what emotional distress? I didn't respond, because sometimes the only appropriate response is silence. He flipped to the second page. They're demanding you withdraw the federal fraud claim immediately. In writing, or they'll pursue civil action. I leaned forward slightly. On what grounds? He looked up at me. None that would survive 10 minutes in a courtroom. He tapped the paper lightly. This is intimidation. Not litigation. Explain. You reported a documented case of identity theft, with evidence, through the proper federal channels. He paused. Trying to sue you for that is essentially them putting in writing that they're involved. So this helps us. It helps a lot. He set the letter down. In fact, if they actually file anything, it becomes discoverable, which means we get access to their records, communications, everything. I nodded once. Then they won't file. No, he said. They won't, because people who commit fraud don't invite scrutiny. They avoid it. This letter wasn't a legal move. It was panic. I picked it up again and looked at the signature. A local attorney, not someone with federal experience, not someone who understood the scale of what was happening, which meant one thing. Marcus hired the cheapest option that would put a letterhead on paper, because that's what people do when they're trying to simulate control. At 13:28, my phone buzzed again. Text message this time. Chloe, are you seriously doing this? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I didn't respond. Another message. You're ruining my life over nothing, nothing. That word again. I typed a response, then deleted it. Because this wasn't a conversation, it was documentation. Every message she sent added to the record. At 14:02, another call came in. Richard Hastings again. His tone had changed. Less measured, more direct. I've started asking questions, he said. And I'm not getting consistent answers. That's expected. There's no record of a transfer from your account. Correct. There is, however. A credit line opened in your name. Yes. And it was used to fund the deposit. Yes. Silence, then slower. They told me you authorized it. I didn't. Another pause. Do you have proof? Yes. Can you provide it? I looked at the attorney across from me. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Not yet, I said. Why not? Because once I do, it becomes permanent. He understood that. People like him always do. And right now, he asked. Right now, you're still deciding what you believe. Silence again, longer this time. I don't like uncertainty, he said finally. Neither do I. We ended the call. I set the phone down and looked at the file in front of me. Everything was there, clean, organized, ready. The forgery, the IP trace, the email, the notary, the letter. And now confirmation that the other side of the situation was still operating under incomplete information. That was the last variable. Once that changed, everything else would follow. They thought they could control perception. They thought they could redirect blame. They thought reputation would shield them. It doesn't. Not when the data is this clear. Not when the documentation is this precise. They thought they could hide their felonies behind wedding invitations and country club gossip. So I decided it was time to introduce their high society in-laws to the brutal, unedited truth. I ignored every comment, every message, every attempt to pull me into a public argument, and focused on the one thing that actually mattered: where they would go next. People under pressure don't get creative. They get predictable. They look for money. At 09:11, I got the confirmation I needed. Not from them. From a third party. A vendor email chain I had already flagged during my initial review, updated automatically. The botanical garden had sent a follow-up notice regarding the canceled reservation, and someone had replied using Chloe's alternate email. Short, urgent. We're meeting with the Hastings family today to resolve funding. We'll update, no location listed. But I didn't need one, because there are only a handful of places in that area where people like them hold emergency meetings with people like the Hastings family. Places where privacy is guaranteed. Places where reputation matters more than price. I checked the timestamp, 8:42, which meant they were likely meeting between 11:30 and 1300, standard window. I cross-referenced it with a few local reservations using publicly accessible data tied to the Hastings name. There it was, private dining room, 12:15, upscale restaurant downtown, confirmed. I didn't rush, I didn't call ahead, I prepared. At 11:40, I was already parked 2 blocks away, uniform pressed, shoes polished, hair secured, not for them, for positioning. Uniforms carry weight in rooms built on perception, and I was about to walk into a room where perception was the only thing holding their story together. At 12:12, I stepped inside. The host noticed me immediately. People always do. Not because of who I am, because of what I represent. Order, structure, accountability. Good afternoon, she said. Do you have a reservation? No, I said. I'm meeting a party already seated. Private room under Hastings. She hesitated for half a second, then nodded. This way, no questions, no resistance. That's the thing about authority signals. They bypass friction. She led me down a quiet hallway, past the main dining area, where conversations softened as I passed. Not silence, just awareness. At the end of the hall, she stopped in front of a closed door. Right inside, she said. I nodded once and opened it. The room was exactly what I expected. Long table, neutral tones, minimal noise. Designed for controlled conversations. Chloe sat on the right side mid-sentence. Marcus across from her, Elaine next to him, and at the far end Richard Hastings and his wife. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward me at the same time. Chloe reacted first. Her face didn't shift gradually. It dropped, color drained, shock, because I wasn't supposed to be there. Marcus stood up immediately, pushing his chair back harder than necessary. "What are you doing here?" he said. I didn't answer. I stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind me. Control the environment. Then I moved forward. Not fast, not slow, measured. Chloe recovered just enough to speak. "You can't just show up like this," she said. "We're in the middle of something." "I know," I said. Marcus moved to intercept, stepping between me and the table. "This is private," he said, lowering his voice. "You need to leave, now." I didn't look at him, because he wasn't the audience. I adjusted my path slightly and stepped around him. He reached out like he was going to stop me. He didn't, because even he understood the line he was about to cross, and what it would look like if he crossed it. I walked straight to the end of the table, to Richard Hastings. He was already watching me, not confused, evaluating. Good. I placed my hand on the back of the empty chair across from him. "Mr. Hastings," I said. "Lieutenant Audrey Linwood." I didn't sit. I didn't offer my hand. I established position. He nodded once. "I recognized the name," he said. "I assumed you would." Elaine stood up slightly. "Audrey, this is not the time." I raised my hand just enough to stop the sentence. Not aggressively, precisely. Then I reached down and placed a thick blue binder on the table. It made a solid, controlled sound, not loud, but enough to shift attention. Marcus stepped closer again. "You need to leave," he said. "This is completely inappropriate." Still didn't look at him, because this wasn't his conversation. I opened the binder. First page, summary sheet, clean layout, chronological. I turned it toward Richard. "You are about to marry into a family currently under federal investigation for identity theft and wire fraud," I said. No pause, no build-up, just fact. The room didn't react immediately, because statements like that take a second to process. Chloe laughed first. Short, sharp. "That's insane," she said. "She's making this up." I flipped to the next page. Loan document, signature, forgery analysis. I slid it slightly closer. "This is a commercial credit line opened 3 days ago. Under my social security number," I said. $40,000, fully drawn within minutes. Richard didn't speak. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a pair of reading glasses, and put them on. Good. That meant he was engaging. Elaine's voice broke in. "Audrey, stop this right now. You're embarrassing yourself." I ignored her and continued. "IP address used for account creation," I said, turning another page. "Residential network. Registered to their home address." Marcus stopped moving, because he understood what that page meant. I pointed to the line. "Timestamp matches the loan origination." Chloe shifted in her seat. "None of this proves anything," she said. "You can fake documents." I turned one more page. Email printout. Her words, highlighted. "I told you this would work. Her credit is perfect." Silence. Real silence this time. Not controlled. Not polite. Disrupted. Richard read the line once. Then again. Then he looked up. Not at me, at Chloe. "Is this accurate?" he asked. Her mouth opened. Closed. No answer. Because denial requires structure, and she didn't have one ready. Elaine reached for the binder. I placed my hand flat on the page. Not forcefully, just enough. "This is already filed," I said. FTC affidavit, bank fraud report, active investigation. That stopped her, because once something is filed at that level, it's no longer internal. It's external, permanent. Marcus finally spoke again. "You've made your point," he said. "Now leave." I turned my head slightly, just enough to acknowledge him. "I'm not here to make a point," I said. "I'm here to correct the record." Then I looked back at Richard. "Everything in this binder is verifiable," I said. Independently, no emotion, no urgency, just clarity. Because people like him don't respond to drama. They respond to risk. And I had just handed him a full report on it. My mother gasped, knocking over her crystal water glass, as the fiancé's father put on his reading glasses. The silence that followed was the sound of a carefully curated, decades-long illusion shattering into a million pieces. I stepped back from the table and let the room process what was in front of them. No commentary, no pressure. Because the strongest position you can take after presenting evidence is silence. Richard Hastings didn't rush. He turned each page carefully, reading everything. His wife leaned slightly closer, scanning the same lines. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. People like them don't react emotionally in public. They assess. Across the table, Chloe shifted in her chair again. Her posture was no longer relaxed. Her hands moved from the edge of the table to her lap, then back again. She was looking for something to say, something that would reframe what they were seeing. "There's context you're missing," she said quickly. "She's twisting this. She's always done this." Stop," Richard said. Not loud, not aggressive, just final. Chloe stopped talking, immediately. He didn't look at her when he said it. He was still reading. That told me everything. He wasn't interested in explanations. He was verifying risk. Marcus tried to step in. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "Family matter. Internal issue that's been escalated unnecessarily." Richard finally looked up. "This document says otherwise." Marcus opened his mouth again, closed it. Because for the first time in this entire situation, he wasn't the one controlling the narrative. Elaine leaned forward, her voice softer now. "We didn't mean for it to look like this. It was temporary, just until after the wedding. We were going to fix everything. Fix, again, always after the fact." Richard didn't respond to her. He turned one more page. The email, Chloe's words, highlighted. "I told you this would work. That line doesn't require interpretation. It explains intent." The room stayed quiet for another few seconds. Then a chair moved. Chloe's fiancé stood up, slow, deliberate. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at his parents. He looked at Chloe for exactly 3 seconds. Then he reached up, pulled the engagement ring off his finger, and placed it on the table. No speech, no argument, just action. Then he turned and walked out of the room. The door closed behind him, and that was it. No negotiation, no second chance, decision made. Chloe stared at the ring like it wasn't real. Then she looked at me, and the reaction finally came. "You did this," she said. Her voice wasn't controlled anymore. It was sharp, unfiltered. "You ruined everything. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I met her gaze. "Yes," I said. She stood up, knocking her chair back slightly. "My wedding is gone. My future is gone. Because you couldn't just help for once." I didn't move. Because this wasn't new. This was the same pattern, just louder. "You're selfish," she continued. "You've always been selfish. You just couldn't stand that something wasn't about you. That was the version of the story she needed. Because the alternative required accountability." I let her finish, then I answered. "You ruined your own life the moment you treated my identity as a blank check. No emotion, no escalation, just a statement." She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Because that line doesn't leave room for argument. Marcus stepped forward, grabbing Chloe's arm. "That's enough," he said. "Not to protect me, to contain her." Because the situation had already shifted beyond recovery. Elaine stood up slowly, her composure completely gone now. "This didn't have to happen," she said, looking at me. "You could have just handled this privately." "No," I said. "You couldn't." That ended it. There was nothing left to say in that room. Richard closed the binder and pushed it slightly back toward me. "We'll be in contact," he said. Professional, controlled, but the tone had changed. This was no longer a potential family connection. This was a liability assessment. I picked up the binder. "Understood," I said. Then I turned and walked out. No rush, no hesitation, just exit. Because once the information is delivered, staying only weakens your position. The hallway felt quieter than before. Or maybe it was just clearer. I stepped outside into the parking lot. And that's when I saw them, 2 patrol cars, parked near the entrance, lights off, engines running, waiting, timing again, not coincidence. The bank's fraud department had flagged the notary. And once that happened, local law enforcement got involved. Because forged commercial documents don't stay internal, they escalate. Marcus and Elaine came out behind me with Chloe a few steps behind them. They stopped when they saw the cars. Confusion first, then realization. An officer stepped forward. Marcus Linwood. Marcus didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "We need to speak with you regarding a financial investigation," the officer continued. "Not an accusation, not yet. Procedure. Another officer approached from the side. Daniel Reeves is also being brought in for questioning, he added. The notary. Exactly as expected. Marcus looked at me, not angry, not shouting, just calculating. Too late. Elaine didn't calculate. She broke. This is your fault, she said, her voice shaking. You called them. You did this. I looked at her. I filed a report, I said. You need to fix this, she continued. Call them. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them it's resolved. I shook my head once. I told you I was reporting a fraud, I said. I don't control the federal government. That landed harder than anything else I'd said, because it removed the illusion that this could still be managed internally. This wasn't family anymore. It was system. And the system doesn't negotiate. Marcus was asked to step aside. He complied. Because at this point, resistance doesn't help. It only adds charges. Chloe stood there frozen, not speaking, not reacting. Because for the first time, she wasn't the center of the situation. She was just part of it. And it wasn't about her anymore. I didn't stay. There was nothing left for me to observe. I turned and walked back toward my car. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Because the narrative had finally collapsed under its own weight. And there was nothing left to argue. Watching the police lights reflect off my parents' luxury sedan, I didn't feel a rush of vindictive joy. What I felt was a profound, overwhelming silence, the kind of silence that only comes when you finally stop carrying other people's lies. I drove away before anyone could turn consequences into another conversation. 6 months later, the wedding still had not happened. Not postponed, not rescheduled, canceled. There is a difference. Postponed means time is the problem. Canceled means reality finally showed up with paperwork. Marcus avoided prison but not consequences. He took a plea agreement tied to the forged commercial documents and the fraudulent credit line. Probation, restitution, legal fees, financial monitoring. The kind of outcome that lets a man keep his house but not his image. For someone like my father, that was almost worse. He had spent decades building the appearance of control. Good family, nice house, clean reputation, smart investments, respectable connections. Then one fraudulent loan turned all of that into a public accounting exercise. Funny how quickly people stop calling something a family matter once a court docket exists. Daniel Reeves, the notary, lost his license and faced charges of his own. Apparently, notarizing a forged signature because your golf buddy asks nicely is not considered best practice. Shocking. Someone alert the ethics board. Oh wait, they already did. Chloe's life changed too. No wedding, no Hastings family, no luxury venue, no European flowers, no carefully staged future funded by someone else's identity. She got a retail job at a home goods store about 20 minutes from our hometown. Minimum wage, rotating shifts, name tag, store policy, actual time clock. I didn't enjoy hearing that. I also didn't feel sorry for her. Work is not punishment. Work is reality. Chloe had just avoided reality longer than most people get to. The fraudulent balance was cleared from my credit file after the investigation verified identity theft. It took documentation calls, follow-ups, and more patience than any sane person should need. But it happened. My credit recovered, my savings stayed intact, and 3 months after the case stabilized, I closed on a small house near my next duty station. Nothing flashy, 2 bedrooms, clean kitchen, good roof, quiet street, a garage with enough space for storage bins labeled by category, because yes, I am exactly that person. The first night I slept there, I woke up at 4:50 out of habit. No alarm, no noise, just discipline doing what discipline does. I made coffee, stood in the kitchen, and listened. No yelling, no demands, no crisis disguised as family loyalty, just quiet. It felt unfamiliar at first, then it felt earned. The letter came 2 weeks later, handwritten, forwarded from my old base address, my mother's handwriting on the envelope. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Elaine wrote 4 pages. She said she missed me. She said the family had been through enough. She said Chloe was struggling. She said Marcus was not the same man. She said we needed a fresh start. And then near the end, she wrote the line I knew was coming. Blood is thicker than water. People love that phrase when they want access without accountability. I read the letter once, then I read it again. Not because I was tempted, because I wanted to be sure. There was no apology, not a real one. There was regret, yes. Regret that consequences happened. Regret that people found out. Regret that the wedding collapsed. But there was no clear sentence that said, "We stole your identity." No sentence that said, "We forged your signature." No sentence that said, "We treated your future like a payment method." So I walked to the corner of my office, turned on the shredder, and fed the pages in one by one, slowly. No anger, no speech, just disposal. Forgiveness is personal. Reconciliation is mutual. People confuse those two because confusion benefits the person asking to come back in. I can forgive someone privately and still deny them access to my life. That is not bitterness, that is policy. And my policy is simple: if you see me as an ATM, you do not get the keys to my house. For years, I thought being useful was the same as being loved. That is the trap in families like mine. One child gets celebrated for existing, the other gets praised for producing. Chloe was the golden child. I was the dependable one. That sounds nicer than scapegoat, but functionally, it is the same job with better branding. If something went wrong, I was expected to fix it. If money was needed, I was expected to provide it. If feelings were hurt, I was expected to absorb them. And if I said no, suddenly I was cold, selfish, dramatic, ungrateful, or not acting like family. That is conditional self-worth. It teaches you that your value depends on how much pain you can tolerate without making other people uncomfortable. That is not love, that is maintenance. And no human being was born to be emotional infrastructure for adults who refuse to manage their own lives. A boundary is not cruelty. A boundary is the line where your life stops being public property. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always call your boundaries an attack. That does not make them right. It only means the old system is no longer working in their favor. Real family does not require you to destroy your credit score to prove loyalty. Real family does not forge your signature and call it teamwork. Real family does not turn your future into emergency funding for someone else's vanity. Respect is not complicated. It is not perfect. It is not always soft, but it does not steal from you. It does not threaten you. And it does not demand that you set yourself on fire so everyone else can stay warm. They gave me 2 days to choose between funding their lies or losing my family. I chose myself. If you are standing in the dark right now being asked to set yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm, remember this: the word no is a complete sentence. Use it and watch how quickly your real life begins. I didn't feel strong when it was over. That's the part people get wrong. There was no moment where I stood in my new house, looked out the window, and thought I won. There was no emotional release, no dramatic sense of closure. What I felt was quieter than that. I felt the absence of something I had been carrying for years without realizing it. Expectation. For most of my life, I was useful. That was my role. Not daughter, not equal, not even backup. Useful. I was the one who handled things. The one who didn't complain. The one who figured it out when something broke. Financially, emotionally, logistically, it didn't matter. If there was a gap, I filled it. And because I did it well, they stopped asking. They started assuming. That's how it happens. Not all at once. Not in a way you notice immediately. It builds in small increments. A request here, a favor there, a situation where it's just easier if you say yes. Until one day saying no feels like betrayal. Not to them. To the role you've been trained to maintain. That was the part I had to confront. Not what they did. What I allowed to become normal. Because here's the truth: most people avoid toxic systems, don't sustain themselves without cooperation. And cooperation doesn't always look like agreement. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like compliance. And sometimes it looks like being the reliable one. That was me, reliable, predictable, available, and completely misinterpreted. Because in their version of reality, reliability wasn't a character trait. It was access. Access to my time. Access to my money. Access to my identity. When they opened that credit line, they didn't think they were crossing a line. They thought they were using a resource. That's the part that matters. They didn't see me as someone they might lose. They saw me as something they could use, and they were confident about it. Not because they were reckless, because history told them I would absorb it, fix it, stay. That confidence didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of reinforcement. Every time I said yes when I should have said no. Every time I explained to myself instead of setting a boundary. Every time I prioritized keeping the peace over protecting my position. That's how you train people to treat you, not intentionally, but effectively. So when I finally said good luck, it wasn't just a response. It was a disruption. It broke the pattern. And when you break a pattern like that, the system reacts. immediately. They didn't start with accountability. They started with pressure, guilt, ultimatums, public narratives, legal threats. Because when someone loses control over a system that benefits them, they don't step back. They escalate. That's predictable. What's less predictable is how you respond. Most people try to negotiate. They try to explain. They try to find a version of the situation where everyone feels okay. That's not what I did. Because I wasn't trying to preserve the relationship. I was trying to correct the reality. And those are two very different objectives. One requires compromise. The other requires clarity. I chose clarity, not because it felt better, because it was accurate. And accuracy matters more than comfort when the consequences are this high. Looking back, the most important lesson wasn't about fraud. It wasn't about legal systems or financial protection. It was about identity, not the one tied to a social security number, the one tied to how you define your role in other people's lives. If your identity is built on being needed, you will tolerate things that should never be acceptable. If your value comes from solving problems, you will eventually become someone else's solution. And solutions don't get consulted, they get used. That's the shift I had to make. From useful to defined. From available to selective. From reactive to structured. That doesn't mean I stopped helping people. It means I started deciding who actually qualifies for that help. Because not everyone who asks deserves access. And not every relationship deserves maintenance. That idea makes people uncomfortable, especially in families. Because family is often used as a bypass for standards. You don't treat family like that. You don't say no to family. You don't walk away from family. Those statements sound strong until you apply them to the wrong behavior. Then they become tools. Tools to keep you in position. Tools to prevent you from evaluating what's actually happening. Here's a better question. Would you accept the same behavior from someone who wasn't related to you? If the answer is no, then the relationship doesn't justify the behavior. It just hides it. That's what I learned. Not in theory, in practice. The moment I stopped being useful, everything became clear. The tone changed. The expectations shifted. The respect disappeared. Not gradually, immediately. And that told me everything I needed to know. Because respect that only exists when you're providing something isn't respect. It's dependency. And dependency without accountability turns into exploitation. That's not dramatic. That's structural. So if you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if you recognize the pattern, the language, the expectations, then the question isn't whether your situation is exactly like mine. It's whether you've been placed into a role that only works as long as you keep giving. Because if that's the case, then the most important thing you can do isn't explain yourself better. It's redefine your position. Quietly, clearly, and without negotiation. The moment you stop being useful to toxic people is the moment they show you who they really are. And once you see that, you don't need to guess anymore. I didn't walk out of that situation with a new personality. I walked out with a new system. That's the difference. People think change is emotional. It's not. Emotion fades. Systems stay. So I didn't focus on being stronger or healing faster. I focused on eliminating the conditions that made that situation possible in the first place. And I did it the same way I handle logistics. Step by step, no assumptions. The first thing I removed was over-explaining. Before all of this, I used to justify everything. If I said no, I followed it with reasons, context, background, a full breakdown of why my decision made sense. I thought that made me reasonable. What it actually did was open the door for negotiation. Because the moment you give someone your reasoning, you give them something to argue with. So I stopped. Now, when someone asks me for something I'm not willing to give, I say, that's not something I'm able to do. And then I stop talking. No follow-up, no softening, no extra explanation to make them more comfortable. That sentence is complete. And if they push, I repeat it. Same tone, same words. Consistency removes confusion. The second thing I changed was how I evaluate people. Before I listened to what people said, now I track what they do. If someone tells me they care about me, I don't accept that as data. I look at behavior. Do they respect my time? Do they respect my boundaries? Do they only reach out when they need something? Because patterns don't lie. And once you start paying attention to patterns, you realize how many relationships are built on convenience instead of respect. That doesn't mean you cut everyone off. It means you categorize accurately. Some people are close. Some people are situational. Some people are transactional. The mistake is treating all three like they're the same. They're not. The third change was structural. I stopped relying on trust as a primary safeguard, not because I expect people to betray me, because I understand that systems fail when they depend on assumptions. So I built layers, credit monitoring, real-time alerts on financial activity, locked credit reports, multi-factor authentication on every account that matters. Not because I'm paranoid, because prevention is cheaper than recovery. Most people don't think about these things until something goes wrong. That's the problem. By the time you react, the damage is already in motion. I don't operate like that anymore. I operate ahead of the issue. That's how you stay in control. Then there's the part no one likes to talk about: pushback. Because the moment you change how you operate, people notice. And not everyone reacts well. Some people adjust, some people respect it, and some people escalate. They'll call you distant, cold, difficult. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're not the same person. And they're right, you're not. Because the version of you they were comfortable with was easier to manage. That doesn't make the old version better. It makes it more accessible. And accessibility without limits is not a strength. It's a vulnerability. So when people react negatively to your boundaries, don't ask, "Did I do something wrong?" Ask a better question. What were they getting from me before that they're not getting now? That answer will tell you everything, because people rarely get upset about boundaries themselves. They get upset about losing access. That's the real issue. And once you understand that, the reactions stop being personal. They become predictable, which means you don't need to argue. You don't need to defend yourself. You just need to stay consistent. That's the part most people struggle with. Consistency, not intensity. You don't need to be aggressive. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to hold the line. Every time, same response, same standard. No exceptions based on pressure. Because the moment you make an exception, you reset the system. And people notice that too. Another thing I changed was how I handle financial requests. Simple rule: if someone asks me for money, I treat it like a transaction, not a favor. That means documentation, clear terms, defined expectations. And if those things aren't present, the answer is no. Immediately, because temporary help without structure usually turns into permanent loss. That's not cynicism, that's pattern recognition. I've seen it too many times to pretend otherwise. And here's the part people don't like to hear. You don't owe anyone access to your resources. Not your time, not your money, not your emotional bandwidth. Access is not automatic. It's earned. And it's maintained through behavior, not titles, not labels, not history. That includes family, especially family, because family has the highest potential for unexamined access. People assume it's permanent. It's not. It's conditional, just like any other relationship. The condition is respect. Without that, the label doesn't mean anything. So if you're listening to this and thinking about your own situation, don't try to replicate what I did step by step. Your situation is different. Your variables are different. But the principles apply. Stop over-explaining. Track behavior, not words. Build systems that protect you. Expect pushback. Stay consistent. And most importantly, stop confusing access with obligation. You don't need to become a different person. You just need to stop being the version of yourself that people learn to exploit. If you've been listening to this and thinking, "This feels familiar," then this part is for you. Not in a general way, in a practical one. Because most people don't need more stories. They need clarity on what to do next. So I'm going to keep this simple. If you are in a situation where someone, family, partner, anyone is pressuring you financially, the first thing you do is pause. Not for 5 minutes, not until the conversation cools down. Give it 24 hours, minimum. Because urgency is a tool. People create artificial deadlines when they don't want you to think. This has to happen today. We don't have time. You're the only one who can fix this. That language is not about reality. It's about control. Real financial decisions can survive a delay. Manipulation cannot. So you wait. And while you wait, you verify. Ask questions that require real answers. Where is the money going? What are the terms? Who is responsible for repayment? And most importantly, what happens if I say no? That last question tells you everything. If the response is understanding you're dealing with a reasonable situation, if the response is pressure, guilt, or anger, then you're not being asked. You're being managed. And that's a different scenario entirely. If someone tries to use guilt, You need to recognize it immediately. It usually sounds familiar. After everything we've done for you, family helps each other. You're going to let this happen. Those are not arguments. They're emotional shortcuts. They're designed to bypass logic and trigger obligation. You don't need to debate them. You don't need to counter them with your own speech. You respond with something simple. I understand how you feel. My answer is still no. That's it. You don't escalate. You don't justify. You don't engage in a back and forth. Because the more you engage, the more opportunities you give them to shift the conversation. Your goal is not to win an argument. Your goal is to maintain your position. Those are not the same thing. If you're afraid that saying no will damage the relationship, then you need to ask a harder question. What kind of relationship only works when you're sacrificing something important? Because that's not stability, that's dependency, and dependency always comes with conditions. You just don't see them clearly until you try to step outside of them. Another thing you need to understand is this: you are not responsible for fixing adults who refuse to act like adults. That includes your parents, that includes your siblings, that includes anyone who has had the time and opportunity to build their own stability but chose not to. Helping someone occasionally is one thing. Becoming their fallback system is another. And fallback systems don't get appreciation, they get expectation. So if you've been positioned as the responsible one, the reliable one, or the one who always figures it out, Bob, you need to be careful. Because that role doesn't come with limits unless you create them. And if you don't create them, someone else will define them for you, usually in a way that benefits them, not you. Here's a simple framework you can use. When someone asks something significant from you, run it through 3 questions. First, would I accept this behavior from someone who isn't family? If the answer is no, don't let the label override the standard. Second, if I say no, what exactly am I losing? Be specific. Is it the relationship? Or is it access to a version of the relationship that only exists when you comply? Third, does the situation require my involvement, or does it just benefit from it? Those are not the same thing. A requirement means there are no alternatives. A benefit means you're just the easiest option. And being the easiest option is not a reason to say yes. It's a reason to reconsider. Now let's talk about fear. Because that's what stops most people. Not logic, not information. Fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of disappointment. Fear of being seen differently. And the biggest one, fear of being alone. Here's the reality. If setting a boundary causes someone to walk away, they were already standing at the exit. You just removed the reason they were staying. That's not a loss. That's clarity. And clarity is useful, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. You don't need everyone to agree with your decisions. You don't need everyone to understand them. You just need to be able to stand behind them without explaining yourself into exhaustion. Because the people who respect you won't require a full report. And the people who don't respect you won't accept one anyway. So stop trying to convert people who benefit from misunderstanding you. It's inefficient. Focus on alignment, not approval. And if you take nothing else from this, take this. The word no is not incomplete. It doesn't need a paragraph after it. It doesn't need context. It doesn't need to be softened to protect someone else's reaction. It is a complete sentence. And it's one of the most effective tools you have. They gave me 2 days to choose between funding their lies or losing my family. I chose myself. Not because it was easy, because it was necessary. If you're standing in that same position right now, trying to decide whether you're allowed to choose yourself, you are. No permission required. And once you do, everything starts to make a lot more sense. If this helped you see your situation more clearly, subscribe to the channel. I don't tell these stories for drama. I tell them so you don't have to learn these lessons the hard way.